Welcome to today's webcast, Outside Counsel Guidelines, 10 Steps to Master Billing and E-Billing Compliance. I'd like to start today out with thanking our sponsor, Belfield. Belfield was founded with one simple but powerful purpose: create better timekeepers. To Belfield, better timekeeping means simplicity for timekeepers and staff, compliance to clients' expectations, and compliance to internal policies. As a result, Belfield has enabled firms to increase revenue and profitability, to minimize inefficiencies for firm operations, and to strengthen their relationships with clients. Today's presenters are Gabriela Estres, co-founder and president, Belfield Systems, as well as Matt Yezovic, VP of Sales, Belfield Systems. And without further ado, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Matt and to Gabby.
Okay, thanks so much, Regina. I appreciate the introduction. Hello, everyone. Again, this is Matt Yezovic. Good afternoon, and thanks for taking time to join us today. I head up the sales organization here at Belfield, and again, Gabby Estres is joining me as the CEO and co-founder of Belfield. Today's webinar is focused on Outside Counsel Guidelines and Billing Guidelines Compliance. Let me go ahead and put that in presentation view. Not that that was, okay. It's a problem perhaps that many of you are familiar with, and perhaps the reason that you have taken time today to join us. We are delighted to welcome a broad audience, including not just law firms, but accounting firms, consulting firms here in the U.S., as well as folks joining us internationally. Here's what's in store for today's webinar. Quick introductions first. We've already started that. We'll jump very shortly into the latest on Outside Counsel Guidelines and Billing Guidelines Compliance. Because Outside Counsel Guidelines Compliance continues to evolve, we will touch on a few of the trends that we're seeing. And like all big problems, change doesn't happen overnight. So Gabby will touch on the journey to compliance from kind of start to finish. That would lead nicely into the 10-step plan, which we hope will offer all of you something to take back to your firms, a few actionable insights there. I do suggest sticking around until the end, because the final piece is perhaps the most insightful, which is ways to leverage technology to solve the Outside Counsel Billing Guidelines problem, including a live demo of Belfield's OCG solution, OCG Live. Regina's already made the introduction. I would say that my background is much less interesting than Gabby's. A fun fact that I like to make everyone aware of is that Gabriela and the other co-founders here at Belfield were previously the co-founders of eBilling Hub. So for those of you that are joining us today that perhaps are using eBilling Hub, that was something that Gabby was intimately involved in. So we like to think that we know a thing or two about e-billing, Outside Counsel Guidelines, and Billing Guidelines Compliance. For those less familiar with Belfield, we are the industry leader in providing firms with time management solutions that remove the many historical barriers that have made time entry, client compliance, and internal time entry policies what most would perhaps say a headache or costly pains in the butt. We have a ton of passion for helping firms to thrive in today's difficult environment. And for those of you that are familiar with ILTA, iTimekeep has been named for the last 6 consecutive years the most adopted time entry management solution in the industry. Today, we do work with over 1,000 law firms of all shapes and sizes, and we do integrate with over 32 time and billing systems. And I emphasize that because perhaps at the conclusion of today's webinar, should you question whether our suite of solutions or our OCG compliance solution specifically, if it can work for you, I would say that there's a very good chance. But of course, please reach out and be happy to make certain of that. Also, very quickly, as many of you know, the ALA conference is just around the corner. It's happening later this week. It's a fantastic show. We will be exhibiting and would love the opportunity to meet with you to have a more tailored conversation based on your needs. In addition to our booth, we are also very excited to host for the very first time an Outside Counsel Guidelines and Billing Guidelines Compliance Workshop. We're going to have multiple of those on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and we've specifically scheduled them not to conflict with your breakout sessions, so they will be during the breaks. The workouts will be an opportunity for you to meet with our experts and to discuss your specific Outside Counsel Guidelines compliance challenges. We can offer some insights on how other firms and how technology are helping to overcome for this issue. So keep an eye out. We will be sending an email reminder this week with the workshop details, including a link to schedule time to stop by. We hope that you will take the time and can join us. Okay, let's get started with the Outside Counsel Guidelines and Billing Compliance. First, I'd like to start the webinar off with a little bit of education on this particular subject. I'm not sure whether you've noticed in your experiences, perhaps you have, but Outside Counsel Guidelines are referred to many things. Some call them Outside Counsel Guidelines, some call them OCGs for short, some refer to them as billing guidelines, rules, restrictions, etc. There are many words that are used, and they're used interchangeably. And that's something that's easy to do, but you might find it interesting to know that the origin of Outside Counsel Guidelines was, in fact, billing guidelines. And billing guidelines started about 2 decades ago, and since then, they've evolved in many, many ways, which we'll touch on in further detail today, but they've evolved into these Outside Counsel documents, which include many things. In an ideal world, Outside Counsel Guidelines, they are designed to include in one document the full spectrum of how both parties will engage, including things like, general expectations, conduct, accountability, how both sides will communicate, etc. The key part there, if you caught that, is that they were intended to be in the ideal world that I just made note of. The reality, unfortunately, is that the ideal world versus reality are two separate things. In fact, in a recent article on Outside Counsel Guidelines, the debate of whether Outside Counsel Guidelines work for or against was a topic of discussion. And I'm happy to share that article with anyone today if you reach out after the webinar. And what was found was that most in-house and outside counsel feel that their OCG and RFP processes don't do much to improve their inside-outside counsel relationships, even though both sides agree that they are very important and both sides spend a lot of time and effort to create and to manage them. So the question is why is this the case? Okay, and I listed here on this slide 3 specific reasons. Number 1 is that they're poorly written. Now, those of you that are familiar with Outside Counsel Guidelines, you probably know that they range anywhere between 30 and 50-page PDF documents. Believe it or not, we've actually come across one that was as long as 327 pages long. Think about that for a moment. That's a lot of paper. The idea that anyone was going to actually go through a 327-page document on either side or had any intention of either implementing or enforcing it is perhaps what some might say is crazy. Number 2, there you see that the legacy documents. Okay, so as I mentioned, billing guidelines is kind of where this whole story started 2 decades ago. And what has happened over the many, many years is that these documents have constantly been appended, right? And so, a new piece is added here, a new piece is added here. And really what has happened is you have this fantastic hodgepodge of stuff, right, in a 30 to 50-page PDF document today. The guidelines rarely reflect a cohesive, a deliberate, and a planned approach to modern relationships. And then the final piece there is that they're one-sided. As a document written by corporate counsel, the guidelines are very one-sided. They're a one-way list of requirements or demands when, in fact, they should promote a partnership. Okay? Moving on quickly to point number 2, there's not much guidance. Rather, these Outside Counsel Guidelines provides descriptions of what constitutes failure. It seems that they're not intended to promote success, which is an opportunity perhaps most would say is being missed. The third point there is dysfunction. Because of the complexity, because of this hodgepodge of stuff, many guidelines promote exactly the opposite behaviors that they're intended to promote. And because a massive document exists that is supposed to regulate a relationship, lawyers on both sides may forget or forego conversations that should be a part of the start of any successful relationship. Now, if you've had the pleasure of having a stack of outside counsel guidelines on your desk, or if you have not, I should say, please let me do the honor of painting the picture for you. Within these outside counsel documents, these 30 to 50 page PDFs, are a wide variety of things. Okay, there's processes and procedures, there's policies, there's billing guidelines, among many, many other components. And while all of these are important, one, especially for today's conversation, one earns the spotlight for directly impacting revenue and the firm meeting its goals, which are billing guidelines over there on the right-hand side of the slide. And I should note, before I dive into billing guidelines, for those of you that are joining perhaps on the IT side, or perhaps something you can take back with you, is right there in the middle under policies. Keep in mind that even cybersecurity and security requirements and expectations are starting to find their way much more frequently into the outside counsel guidelines documentation. So perhaps you want to be careful of that in the case that you're agreeing to something that may be difficult to actually abide by. Unfortunately, outside counsel guidelines, billing guidelines, they're not just a headache for one person or even for one particular department at your firm. Billing guidelines, as you may well know, they impact many parts of the firm and operations. For example, lawyers, fee earners, they're responsible for delivering the services that they agreed to and are in compliance with the client guidelines and expectations. General counsel and intake, they sign off right on these OCGs and billing guidelines, but in many cases they struggle to actually monitor compliance. The CFO, Director of Finance, naturally are going to be involved because of revenue, because of collection realization, because they're responsible for taking on the mounting pressures that are coming down from the executive management team at the firm. And further, the CFO and the Director of Finance and that department, they're responsible for managing resources. So when it comes to billing guidelines, there's a lot of overhead that is typically involved, and that is up to finance to make sure that they're properly managing costs within the firm. And then there's what we call the unsung heroes, the billing, the accounting folks who are taking on the everyday challenge of manually fixing everything that they can to avoid invoice rejections, reductions, and of course write-offs. Okay, so a lot of people are involved here. Now, before I transition this over to Gabby to pick up the next part of the presentation, I do want to have a little bit of fun first. Okay, we covered a little bit here about outside counsel guidelines, billing guidelines, compliance. What I'd like to do is we'll poll the audience. Okay, so please, everyone, feel free to participate. We can make this fun. I have 3 questions I'm going to go through, and there's going to be a poll that's going to appear. Okay, for all of you to provide your feedback. The first question related to outside counsel guidelines is law departments. They provide outside counsel guidelines as an efficient way to control costs. Right? That's what's important to the law departments. For all of you out there, feel free to give this a go. See if you know the answer. What percentage of those guidelines are effectively enforced? Is it 65%, 96%, or 81%? I wish I had Jeopardy music, to play. So go ahead and take another. What do we have? Maybe 20 seconds. Feel free to give it your best shot. Okay, I think we're getting close there. I think we just have to run it for about 1 minute. All right, Regina, I think the answer is, there we go. So the feedback that we have is that 70% think it's 65, 6% of you joining us today believe it's 96, and 23% are voting for 81%. And the answer is 81%. So for those of you, the 23%, you're 1 for 1. Congratulations. Let's have some more fun. Let's jump to question number 2. Again, if everyone wants to participate, feel free. It makes it fun. So question number 2. Law departments are working to create greater predictability and transparency on law firm fees. To that end, what percentage of law departments do you think require budgets on major matters? Your options here are 90% as answer A, 83% as answer B, or 40% for the third and final answer. And we'll cue the Jeopardy music again. We got about another 15 seconds, folks. Feel free to give it your best guess. And Regina, once the time has, once we've met her, feel free to put the results out there, and we'll see how we did.
Will do. 5 seconds.
I'm impatiently waiting, Regina. I'm curious. Looks like it's a pretty even one on this one. So 41% responded with 90%. 36 of you responded at 83%. And 22% responded at 40%. So the answer is 83%. So congrats to you, 36%, that got that one correct. So 83% is the correct answer. Let's go to the third and final question, question number 3. All right. For those of you that didn't get one of the first 2 right, this is your chance to redeem yourself. E-billing is considered the most effective technology for controlling costs. What percentage of law firms do you think have implemented e-billing? First answer, 77%, 94%, or 65%. And I will say, folks, that for e-billing, for non-e-billing, every conversation we tend to have, it is never trending down. It is always going up. So let's see what all of you think about this particular one. All right, and the results are about in. Similar to the last one. It's close to perfect thirds. So the answers we have here is 41% chose 77%, 26% of you chose 94%, and 33% of you chose 65%. The answer is A, 77%, which was the majority of you. So hopefully, again, you folks that got the first 2 wrong, you had the chance to redeem yourself there. All right. So, folks, hopefully that was a little bit of fun. A couple of poll questions. Thanks, Regina, for helping to facilitate that with the poll results. And, folks, with that, I want to turn it over now to the next interesting part of the presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Gabby, who is going to enlighten you on the journey on compliance. Thanks, everyone, for your attention. I'll jump back in at the end to wrap things up. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Matt. I'm very excited to be with you guys today, and thank you so much for participating in the poll and and for participating in the webinar. So I wanted to get started by kind of like laying out the full scope of OCG compliance. Like Matt said in his presentation, OCG, Outside Counsel Guidelines, it's pretty spread out. So my goal is, kind of like show what is the compliance journey from compliance to collections, what are the day-to-day operations of each phase, and also what tools can help us every step of the way. So this map that I'm going to present to you is divided in two main phases. Phase one, which is the part of the pre-engagement, discussions, negotiations. And the phase two, it will be the delivery of those services once we have agreed upon, right, our guidelines and our agreements. So these two phases are totally different phases. You have 2 or 3 totally different teams. In phase one, you may have the rainmakers that originate and negotiate the business. You have pricing and contract managers. And in phase two, you're going to have the attorneys that actually deliver the services, and the management and the staff that will help the lawyers to accomplish the delivery of those services. So again, those are two different phases. Two different teams, but more importantly, with two very different goals. For example, in the phase one, the contract negotiating team is going to be asking themselves questions like, are we properly pricing our services? How does this engagement compare to others? Does this agreement cover all the bases? So, and then, are there any tools? Is there anything for us to help us to be more efficient during this phase? So there are different tools. There are specific tools for pricing, and I will be happy to share with you which ones are those. There are very different agreement review tools, and because remember, the Outside Counsel Guidelines is just one type of agreement. And the next generation, it's probably you're going to run into, it's artificial intelligence powered contract tools. Okay. Again, artificial intelligence is not science fiction that it will do everything for us, but certainly will make the life of our attorneys and pricing and negotiating managers a lot easier. So okay, so that's the phase one, right? At some point, you will sign the contract. And you win the client or the matter, and now you go into phase two, which is the actual delivery of the services. Again, even within phase two, it is a totally different team with different goals and a different set of questions as well. I want you to look at this phase as a closed loop by which you do the work. At the end of the month or at the end of the quarter, you send an invoice to the client. The client reviews the invoices, approve it or no, right, and sends payment, right? And you do this again and again and again, right? So in this phase two, the overarching question is, are we as a firm doing everything that is possible to make sure that we comply with the client guidelines at all times? Are our invoices going out on time, right? How often are they getting rejected or questions, right? So our payments can come unimpeded. So what does this mean, right? Here are some of the questions that your delivery team have to answer during the day-to-day operations. Let's see which ones are they. Right? Is my time card inventory, right, or my bunch of time cards, right, free of any violations? Can I prove this? How do I know that? Right? Which are the timekeepers that have to be pre-approved by the client before the next billing cycle so we can get the invoices through? Correct? Which are the time cards that have to be manually added? For example, if the client is not going to pay for travel time. Who knows the rules, right? Are these billing rules automated, right? And if anything, are these rules consistently enforced? Are my timekeepers, are the attorneys seeing the violations as they do their work, right? And are they learning to become any better? Which timekeepers need to read the guidelines and also acknowledge to those guidelines, right? Have they done it, right? Can we prove that they actually read the guidelines, right? And some of you might be laughing, but these are the things that we have to seriously consider. When a guideline is updated, for example, which timekeepers need to be notified about the changes? And many more day-to-day issues, for example, budgets, accruals, and all that. Okay, so so this is the technology that we have developed. Okay, and we're going to show that later in the presentation, right? And how OCG Live is addressing all these challenges and questions that the law firms are going through every day. Right? So at the end of the phase 2, okay, we move on. The billing department and the finance department come into the picture, right? And they do have their own set of goals and questions, right? And they're going to be asking themselves, despite everything that we're doing, what are we missing? Right? Are my invoices formatted the way that the clients want it? How often my invoices are questioned or rejected, and how many times do I have to appeal in those type of things, right? And for this last part of the phase 2, right, there are also some technology available today, such as eBilling Hub, right? There are some other tools like most recently Bill Blast, right? Some of the accounting systems, they do have the lead generation tools in whatever fit your firms best. But when you think of OCG, right, you got to think again, different teams, different goals, different set of questions, right? Different means and tools. Okay. So with this understanding, let's review the phase 2 a little bit more, which is the billing guidelines and case management guidelines. And yes, this is the screen, right? And as Matt said before, on the billing guidelines, in the part of the billing guidelines is basically where the revenue is, right? And we can kind of like summarize the elements that compose these phase 2, right? You have expenses that you have to deal with, right? You have to do overrides, they paid or no, right? You have to attach receipts. You're going to have explicit rules that I'm going to cover next. You also have hidden rules, and I put it in bright red for a reason, right? We have all the dealing with rejections and appeals, okay? So this is kind of like where the main pain points are during this phase. So explicit rules. Let's go into the explicit rules, right? These are actual guidelines, right? But the explicit rules are something that we human beings can understand what the guidelines want to say, right? Somehow they provide some clarity, and hopefully we can, implement those, right? For example, when you look at the guidelines, right, you will immediately understand the explicit rules because they tell you what it is, right? So you have to bill me in 1/10 of an hour, right? Some of you that are doing insurance work probably know that the latest trend, it's a billing in 1/100 a hundredth of an hour. The other one that is still is explicit but is hard to enforce, right? It's one attorney attending one event, right? Which is part of the matter staffing, right? No block billing, we get that, but even so, right? Block billing might mean different things to different vendors. One might use a semicolon, the other might use several ends. And then I will say that this is my favorite, right? The hidden rules are what is causing most of your rejections, right? Why? Because they don't tell you what it means, right? And not only that, right? One rule can be, even though that it is very vague, right? Can be implemented differently by different e-billing vendors, right? For example, right? What are reasonable fees? Right? How do I know what these are reasonable fees, right? Clerical work. In this one, they provide a little bit more of an example, but for some firms, right? Clerical work it could mean don't use the word database, right? Or it can be that a partner is doing some other type of L code, right? So we have excessive time, which is one of my favorite. What is excessive time, right? So approvals, right? For this company, you have to, for research, right? For Liberty Mutual, you have to do 2 hours. More than 2 hours, you need approval. For job, it's 3 hours or more, give or take, right? So when you think about it, not only, this is almost impossible for a lawyer to remember every rule and all the nuances of these rules that vary from vendor to vendor, right? But where do you think all this knowledge reside? Okay, so nowhere, right? That's what you're thinking, right? So some people, they have some guides and they keep some notebooks, right? Others, they have some like cheat sheets, but for most, and this is in the head, in the brains of your billing and finance teams, right? And and I see people, really acknowledging that. So how does this scale, right? Well, it doesn't, right? Some firms, in a way to get around this, they continue hiring people. One of the most recent trends that I've heard is that they actually, for big firms with a lot of litigation, a lot of billing, insurance defense, they might actually be hiring some of the adjusters on the other side to help them understand how can I serve better my clients, right? And this is something that I just started to learn. Okay. So so we went over the all the rules, right? And there is more, right? So this is not just the billing, like Matt said, and like we saw in the whole journey, right? So within the OCG, there are case management rules. For example, you have a 45-day reporting, right? You have to do the budgets this way, right? There are IT rules, okay? Like if you're working for me, you cannot use Wi-Fi in public places, right? So for marketing, right? We cannot use our client name if we don't have a prior approval and those type of things. So how are we getting these guidelines and this message to the other parties, right? So probably we are not doing that today. And but this is not everything yet, right? Remember that this is kind of like a mounting problem, right? So most recently, in the last ILTA show, The in-house counsel of for Microsoft, Starbucks, and Rackspace, which is a hosting company, they were part of a panel, and they were asked about their expectations, for their lawyers and outside counsel, right? So, and here's a little bit of a summary of what they answered, right? Number one, expertise in cultural alignment, right, including diversity. Also, they're looking at efficiencies in alignment with the company operations, right? The right use of technology and be technologically competent. Of course, flexible pricing, and we're seeing the alternate fee arrangements. We see that a lot more often, right? Better budgeting, and we saw in the survey, right, that most of the clients are asking for budgets for large matters, right? And this is the key piece, right, which is, of course, increased compliance. So OCG is beyond billing and e-billing, right? They're looking at the whole picture, right, as well as, identifying compliance as a better way to manage expenses as well. Okay, so what is next? So in order to increase compliance, we have compiled our 10-step best practices. It might seem a little bit simple and even obvious to you, but you will be surprised how many law firms, large and small, are struggling today to understand how to better manage their OCGs, right? So I was about a couple of months ago. We were working with a very, very, very large law firm, and they was just getting started in the process of understanding what are the best practices, what they need to do, and start kind of like addressing the complexity. So this is something simple to get started, which is understand your process, right? Good or bad, just know what it is. It could be that nobody knows where the OCGs are, right? But at least you have a little bit of a grasp of what your current process is. Then assign someone to review the guidelines. Probably you have someone that is already assigned for phase one, right? But how about phase two? Create OCG summaries. This is a little bit of, do we have the capability? Do we have the manpower? Do we have the direction to do that, right? And as a part of that documentation, can we take a little bit of a step further to document what are those explicit rules, hidden rules, right? Expense rules. Work and train attorneys. What we have seen is attorney training comes when you have a lawyer that is getting a big percentage of the bill rejected, and this is when it comes. Okay, so how can I do to help you, right? But think in terms of, and this is different for all people. So, but in all firms, but think about, right? What can we do to have my attorneys to be in the know? Lawyers are, very successful professionals, and they want to continue to succeed. What can we do to help them, right? Timekeeper approval is something big because if you are doing a billing and you are submitting your invoices, if timekeepers are not approved, they're going to reject your full invoice. It doesn't matter if the invoice is a $100 invoice or it's a $40,000 invoice. So review previews. This is something that a lot of the load is in, and you have attorneys, you have case managers, everybody trying to enforce some sort of compliance, everything manual. So the next one, it's develop a process for rejections and appeals if you don't have it right now, right? Appeals are complex, and appeals are extremely costly. So everything that you can do to avoid this, it's exactly what law firms should be doing. Be accountable, understand your level of rejections, how much dollars do you have at risk per timekeeper, per client, right? Who is the one that is rejecting most of my invoices, why they're doing that. And lastly, leverage technology. I already show a little bit of, the different tools that exist, right? And especially OCG Live, how those display into the overall process and journey. So what you're going to see today in the live demo, right? It's how we're using the OCG technology to help law firms with four things. Okay, so again, we go back to the phase 2. It's the ability to manage the guidelines and the rules. In everything being centralized, so you don't have a dispersed repository. Number 2, it's my attorneys, how we can help them to know what is in the guidelines, right? For the financial managers, can I see what are all the violations and how much dollars I have at risk? And also, our solution help with the compliance at the point of time entry as time gets entered. So I'm going to jump quickly into the demo so we can open it up for questions. So give me 1 second while I set up my environment here. And I'm sharing my screen. Okay. And let's say that I'm an attorney, right? I just started working on a matter, right? And as soon I'm working for John Doe, I'm working for Johnson & Johnson. And as soon as, let me go back to here, right? So as soon as I started working, I enter my time card. I get a notification that says, "Hey, John, welcome to Johnson & Johnson," and here is a summary of the guidelines. Right? So I can see this on my mobile device, I can see this on my screen, and this is the summary that we're talking about, right? So everything is in here, but more importantly, there is a place in here to acknowledge to the guidelines, right? Therefore, the financial managers at the firm, the risk management teams at the firm will understand who is reading the guidelines and who is acknowledging to those, right? And for the billing department, they also get a notification. Why? Because now they know that John Doe started working for Johnson & Johnson, so they can go proactively and get their rates approved, right? So, I started working for Johnson & Johnson. Everybody gets notified, and I acknowledge my guidelines and everything that I needed to know, right? So then I'm gonna go and start working on my matter, and I'm going to my mobile device, and I'm gonna enter a time card. Okay. So I click on the plus sign. Of course, I'm working for the Johnson & Johnson matter. I default to today. This was 6 hours. I choose my task and activity code, right? And then I will say prepare for meeting, period. I'm done. I submit it. But what happened, right? I get a notification that said, please do not use prepare when it's more than 3 hours, right? Please use plan on similar. So I'm the attorney, and I'm already learning without even knowing this. So I'm going to say I'm too busy. I'm going to continue. I know that I'm going to fix this as soon as I get to my office. So I get to my office. I open, my time solution, and I'm going to complete it, and I'm going to complete my edits, right? So, this is the timer that I just created for today, 6 hours. And I'm going to complete it, and I'm going to use my abbreviations. And I have TS3, and I have my other abbreviation. So I'll do that, and I'm going to go ahead and submit it. Okay? So what happened there, right? So you get a list of all the violations and how to fix it, right? Do not use a schedule, use plan, summarize, whatever. All right. So how does all this magic get in, right? And not only how this magic works, but how about my clients that are non-e-billing clients? So this is the OCG Live Managing Portal that, as I told you before, it's a place to centralize the guidelines, centralize your rules, and be pretty much your guidelines and risk management portal. So, if I look for, here is the Johnson & Johnson, okay? And so the first thing is when we see how this works behind the scenes, right? I set up already Johnson & Johnson. I can set up guidelines for Mexico and Poland, right? So in this portal, I said, okay, the clients that meet these criteria are going to be subject to Johnson & Johnson guidelines. So then I centralize all the documents so I know that they're not going to be sitting anymore in the attorney's drawer. And this is the summary, right? What we created to be in front of the lawyers, you can centralize everything in here. So everybody's looking at the same copy of what is being summarized and what needs to be done, right? And in addition to that, this is the part where the brain of this is, and these are the rules. I set up these 4 rules, and those are the 4 rules that got triggered because I purposely violated every single rule for the demo today. But look what happened. I can easily modify this rule, okay? And this is absolutely real time, and I'm going to say thank you, ALA. I save my rule. And I'm going back to my time. I'm going to save it again and see what happens. Thank you, ALA. It couldn't be more real time. Because of how dynamic the world of compliance is moving, right? You need to have a tool that is as easy for you to comply. Because what happens is, let's say time metrics for a given client, right? They're not paying 0.3 anymore for emails, and they started to approving only emails that are 0.1 or 0.2. You need the ability to come in here and fix it. But I also told you that OCG Live, it's a fantastic tool for OCG clients that are non-e-billing. You will have a number of clients by which you need to comply as well. And not only that, you may have some internal rules that apply to your firm, that apply to a practice, or apply to a location that you want to enforce. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create, let's say, Belfield, the guidelines for the wonderful company of Belfield. So, and I want to show you how simple this is. OCG Live was designed for everybody in the finance and the billing staff to be able, in risk management, to be able to manage without the help of IT. We love IT, but IT is busy, right? So this is something that I like to say, if you can buy in Amazon, you can use OCG Live. So I'm going to create my client, Belfield, right? And here it is. I'm going to activate it. I add what is the scope of these guidelines, and I said every client that contains 9898 is going to be subject to the guidelines, okay? And I don't have time to set up the documents and the summary, right? So I'm just going to go right into my rules. And because this is a non-e-billing client, I want to make sure that when this client, and by the way, this client wants 1 entry per timekeeper per day. So this is completely the opposite, because you're going to have clients that they do want block billing. What do we do then, right? So we do have a rule in here when we look at the rule, there is a title for every rule. All right. So, this is what you can search on and, how you want it set up. All right. So, my rule is gonna be called check block billing. The message is how you want your timekeepers, your legal assistant who are entering time on behalf of the attorney, right, to learn about this. So I have it here, and I will say, please correct the individual blocks do not add up to the total of the timer. And actually, I want this to be an error, so you can set up the severity of that, right? On the left-hand side, there is no limit to setting up the compliance and the rules that you want to set up. In this case, because we don't have much time, I'm going to choose my time entry tag in here, and I'm going to choose in here a pre-function that is called already block billing integrity. All right, so I'm going to save it. My client has been already set up. My rule is already enabled, right? So let's see how this works. Okay, so I'm gonna continue, right? And I'm gonna go ahead and create a timer for the Belfield IPO matter. Remember, this is a non-e-billing, and my client wants block billing. So I have a narrative in here that is already prepared. I chose today, and I'm going to say this is 9 hours, right? So I enter my block billing, and you can see this block billing is a little bit of the standard, right? And I'm going to go ahead and submit it, okay? Please correct exactly what we did. And you know what? Oh, I forgot, right? I'm going to fix it now. And this is about 3 hours and a half because this is what the increments add up to. I submitted, and that's it. Okay? So that is the experience for everybody that is working on a matter and they want to comply in real time. So now what happens, let's say that, if I don't have a time keep, right? And, or I don't want to get my attorneys yet to this type of compliance. Absolutely. So I'm going to show you, remember the part of the reporting that we saw? Part of the OCG Live is making you aware of your levels of compliance. For the CFO, the risk managers, and everybody, right, we have the executive summary, right? That will tell you by client how much dollars you have at risk, right? And by timekeeper, how much dollars are at risk by this timekeeper, so you can individually address, right, any areas of concerns, and don't wait until the bills get rejected or the bills get, you get the appeals and write-off, right? So, so this is the executive, what we call the executive summary, right? And this is the daily violations report, right? It gives you a full breakdown of everything that is in violation, whether it was entered in item keep and is not fixed, right? Or it was entered in your billing system, right? Whether it's ProLaw, 3E, Enterprise, add-on, it doesn't really matter, right? And the final experience is right from OCG Live. You have the ability to generate these reports and send it to someone, right? So what you're seeing here, of course, is sample data, but right from OCG Live, you click on report and you can generate at any point of time the compliance report that you want, right? I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, right? But you can see, all these functions, narrative is more than 250 characters. All that is there, right, for you guys to fix it, and so you don't have to do that later. So it's about 2:55 p.m. Eastern Time. I want to wrap up and open it up for questions. Okay?
All right, great, fantastic. Actually, we do have one question that came in really early during Matt's presentation, so I want to cover that real fast. Jessie Marie was just wanting to get a definition around matters and a case. So basically, what's your definition of matters and a case?
Yeah, they are. They're the same basically. So in law firms, that's they can be used either way. But for example, if you are an accounting firm or an engineering firm, most likely that will be the equivalent to a project.
Okay, great, great. All right, so the remaining questions came in while you were presenting, Gabriella, so more focused on your presentation. Does the OCG software create the summaries of the guidelines, or is that something we would have to do manually, or is it just a summary of the rules that you have created in the software?
The answer is both. We do provide a service and we have a library of these guidelines for you to consume, right? So if you want something that is a little bit more tailored because you are your firm or you have a practice that is very specific, right? We can work with you to do everything for you. We do the summaries, we do the rules, and we customize it, right, to make it fit your needs, right? For example, I had a firm, they don't want to have the senior partners to go and to be presented with these rules, right? So, but the associates and the junior partners, everybody has to comply, right? So we are setting up the system for the senior partner, right? Any violation goes immediately to the legal assistant, right? And for everybody else, it will be the timekeeper that has to fix it. All right. So in addition to that, like I said, we have a library, right, that we can share with you. And ultimately, if your team in your firm has the time and the resources, this is 100% for you, and you can do everything without our help, just with the training and support.
Okay. All right, great. So Judith wants to know, does it work with other billing programs like Tabs, or is it just iTimekeep?
No, that's an excellent question. OCG Live works with pretty much any time and billing system, right? So it does integrate with Tabs. And but the best experience it's when you are using iTimekeep to enter a time. And again, you can use iTimekeep 100% bidirectional, integrated with Tabs, ProLaw, and any other program. But it does integrate with pretty much every legal time and billing system.
Okay, great, great. So we're moving to Coyote Analytics. Is there a reason we would need iTimekeep?
So a lot of firms are moving to Coyote. They're a wonderful team. We work very closely with them, and you can have an enhanced experience using iTimekeep integration with a Coyote, right? One of the main added value in our relationship is the ability to enter time anywhere, right? From a Mac machine, like I'm doing my demo from a Mac today, an Android device, anywhere. So that it's part of our partnership because today Coyote does not have that. But in addition to that, you add the layer of OCG compliance that it can be enabled, from the time entry, and as well as the backend report with all the list of violations. So Coyote and iTimekeep and OCG, it's a beautiful relationship.
Okay, great, great. All right, we are at the top of the time. Let's see if we can get these few questions in. Does this interface with other timekeeping systems if we want to use our existing system to enter time?
Yes, and absolutely. Let's say, for example, the person that asked the question has added an elite or 3E or even DTE or something like that, right? It integrates 100%. Uh, in what the firms will get is the violations report, all the with all the things that need to be fixed, right? The executive report with all the dollars at risk, but because they're already using a different interface, they don't get it at the point of time entry, right? But because they don't get it at the point of time entry, they get the daily summary with all the list of exceptions, violations, and how to fix it.
Okay, great, great. I've got two additional questions. You may have answered this one. Does OCG Live accommodate for non-e-billing OCG's billing guidelines? We don't use iTimeKeep for time entry. Is that required to use your compliance tool?
Yeah, and a little bit of what I answered. OCG Live is for both e-billing, non-e-billing, and like I said, you can even set up rules that are none of OCG. It can be particular to the way that you want to enforce compliance at the firm, by location, by practice area, right? You name it, right? By title, and those type of things, right? And yeah, like I said before, the best experience, of course, is when you're using item keep, because you can get your pop-up of a violation, from your mobile device, your desktop, but you don't have to. So basically, all these violations and how to fix it, they come, in your daily report, and even you can run the report at will.
Okay, great. And just one last one, which will kind of sum up what you just stated. If using OCG Live and we change TMB systems, do we lose the rules we have set up? Also, how do the rules get set up in OCG Live? Do we use templates?
Yeah. So never you will lose the rules because OCG Live and item keep, they both integrate in real time with whatever time and billing system you have, right? So you can be using, let's say, Enterprise today, right? And you're moving to a different system tomorrow. The beauty of this is the experience is one. Basically, you are changing plugs, and everything remains the same. So that is it is a very it's getting very well received for firms that are switching systems to adopt item keep and OCG Live as their primary system. And yes, we integrate with everybody. Okay.
Great, fantastic. This has been great. Matt, Gabriella, did you want to leave us with anything before we close out for today?
No, I would just simply chime in and say again, we want to reiterate our thanks to everyone. So appreciate you taking time out of your day. We know we went over a few minutes. And I would also simply reiterate that, again, we will be at ALA, we will be exhibiting, we will have a booth, and we will be running the Outside Counsel Guidelines, Billing Guidelines workshops. So keep an eye out for an email on that. And if you'd like to see a live demo tailored to your firm and to your firm's needs, please reach out, and we'd be more than happy to facilitate that while we are at ALA, or to facilitate that even remotely at a separate time that works, most conveniently for you. So feel free to reach out. We're here and we're happy to help.
All right. Thank you very much. This has been great. Thank you so much for your time, Gabriella and Matt. And thank you so much to Belfield for sponsoring today's webcast. This actually concludes today's webcast. Thank you all for attending. The recording will be available at legalmarketplace.alanet.org. We will send all registrants an email tomorrow with this link. And please visit our event calendar to sign up for future webcasts.